Literature Prize for 2014 for English non-fiction, Josephine Chia, author of Kampong Spirit, Gotong Royong, Life in Potong Pasir, 1955 to 1965. Josephine, welcome. The book starts in 1955, 4 years after your birth. Now, I know at age 4 you had a botched hair job. It was a ferocious perm, and you show us a picture of you at 4 years old with adorable curls. But why did you start in 1955 to Life in Potong Pasir?
Good evening, Michelle. Thanks for inviting me. Good evening, everyone. I think that I wanted to start the stories, I suppose, of the village with the riots that were happening in Singapore at that time. So in 1954, there was a huge riot, the Hockley amalgamated riots between the bus workers, and also there were communist infiltration, that sort of thing. So that was a very interesting period. I thought it would be a good point to start as well.
Right. Okay, so the book is set, of course, in this very tumultuous period of Singapore's history where we're working towards nationhood, and you pick a moment where, as you say, things can feel rather heated, and yet life in the village seems very peaceful.
Yes, it was, except that when the rioters tried to get away, they did use the villagers to run and hide, and so a great number of the colonial police are afraid of going into the kampongs, like Kampong Tai Seng, for example, which was very well known for gangsters. So there are sort of guards outside the village entrance. So the colonial police and even the local police dare not go into the kampongs. So that's
they
why,
were convenient hiding out places.
Yes. So this book, goes through not only the communist infiltration, the confrontasi, and also through the Malay-Chinese riots at one stage. So, and the people would run all over into the village because the kampongs have lots of small lanes called lorongs, and so they could weave around, and if they know the kampong, they know the place. So it's like a maze. So the authorities rarely know the village that well.
Kampong Spirit is a collection of real-life short stories. It takes us back to the village life of Potong Pasir, where there were atap houses, no electricity, no running water. I see on your front page you have 5 little children, and they have the biggest smiles on their faces, even though they have very little on. They're playing, of course, in the water. Is this the water
this is
supply?
The standpipe for drinking water, because all our water comes from wells. So subsequently, the government did provide a standpipe, as you see on the cover of the book, and that's for drinking only. We're not actually supposed to use it for washing and all that, because they were saving water at that time.
If you'd like to see the picture that we're talking about, head to our official 938 Live Facebook page and click like on the picture, and you could walk away with an autographed copy of Kampong Spirit. Disclaimer, it will be my copy. So, like a book that has been read, I think, is a living document.
I'll give you another copy, Michelle.
That's kind. I was going to give them this copy.
Oh, no.
All right, you heard it there from Josephine. You get a brand new copy of your own. If you head to official 938 Live and click like on the picture of Kampong Spirit, a beautiful, beautiful book. I first met Josephine when she had written after the second reissuing of her book Frog Under a Coconut Shell, which has been translated to Bahasa Indonesia.
Yes. Oh, I meant to bring the cover. I forgot.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That book has had 2 runs. It is a beautiful tribute, I think, to your mother. And in that book, we hear about the role that she played in your life. You touch a little bit about it in this book as well, Kampong Spirit. The reason why I'm always so keen to speak with Josephine is because I know that as a little girl, she yearned to read. And she yearned to write. And here she is sitting across me, the Singapore Literature Prize winner of 2014 and author of more than 9 books. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that moment of epiphany for you when you realize you can't read. This has something to do with a Milo tin can.
Oh, what a memory you have. Yes, I saw a Milo tin and I looked at the tin and I realized they were all squiggles. If you are uneducated, any letters in the alphabet doesn't make any sense. And I looked at it and I thought, my God, I'm stupid, I can't read.
How old were you?
About nearly 7 at that stage. And then I realized that I think I wanted to go to school, and I said to my mom I would like to go to school. And my mom said, there's just no money. The boys get educated.
There were 16 in your family, right?
She had 16 children from the age of 17 because they didn't have birth control in those days. So one every other year. But because they were so poor and because of the war, 8 children died, so, and 1 was given away. So I didn't know my elder sisters.
And education for a woman was seen as unnecessary?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
In the Kampong?
The Chinese saying at that time, the Teochew saying in Hokkien was "Chia Liu Bi," that means to waste rice, girls waste rice. This is something that is drummed into girls a lot. And especially out in the kampongs. I mean, if you were brought up in a wealthy family in a town, it's different, but in the kampongs. So the priority was given to the boys to go to school, and then of course food. So education for girls was the least of the priorities.
But your mother decided, and I read a chapter of Kampong Spirit where your mom decides an education would mean you would not have to depend on a man, and you would have a chance at a life different from hers.
Yeah, I think she was so far-sighted. Maybe, she's a visionary, because, I mean, it's amazing for a woman to think like that at that time.
Absolutely.
And maybe she went through a lot of suffering herself, so she thought she would try to make life better for me. So she said she will sell the nasi lemak, but I had to go around the kampong to sell it, so she put all the nasi lemak in a basket, and I went around and said, nasi lemak 10 sen, nasi lemak 10 sen.
So you had to want it too. You had to work for it.
Well, she said I had to. And then she took some washing from the neighbors and the English family living at the top of the hill. So, but I had to, Atas Bukit.
Atas Bukit.
So
usually English people living there.
Yeah, there were English people because they were engineers working on the PUB sewage system in Woodley. So, yeah.
So you sold nasi lemak and kueh to raise funds.
Yeah, and draw the water from the well so that my mom can wash clothes, so that we can get the money for me to go to school. Yeah.
Incredible. And was there opposition from within the family for you to go to school?
No, by that time my brothers were already educated and in a missionary school in St. Andrews, which is just across, where Potong Pasir. And so my father said, so long as you don't touch the housekeeping money or the money for the food, I'm not going to interfere. So that's how she, managed to send me to school.
Amazing. And you can read more about Josephine's mother in a very moving book, Frog Under a Coconut Shell, which is derived from the peribahasa kata di bawah tempurung, that Malay peribahasa. Kampung Spirit, the words under it are gotong royong, which we understand means community spirit. Do you know, can you share with us a little bit about that phrase and what it means to you?
I think when I have been away a long time, 30 years in England, and so when I came back, I think that the Singapore that I came back to was quite different from the Singapore that I left. And so, it was not long after the kampongs there were resettlement and all that, and I left for England. And so when I came back, it was quite in the beginning was quite a shock, because there was so many buildings around, and people were not behaving in the same way as they were in the villages that or in the kampongs that I knew. So I thought, gosh, what it was. Despite the deprivation, despite the poverty and all that, we were very happy people. In the book, you will get a story of one of the young men. All the names have been changed to protect the people, except for my own name. And one young man who had a terrible job of cleaning out the outhouses, the bucket system. And yet he had a lot of talent. He was a musician, and his talent was not discovered because he was uneducated. But people were happy, and in the evening, because we have no electricity, so we can't sit indoors. We don't have television. We don't have iPads. We don't have computers. So we sat outdoors, and everybody talked to each other, and we sang songs, and we told stories, and we recited pantun. So the community was just absolutely fantastic.
Wow, can't imagine that. And people got to see each other beyond their occupations then.
That's exactly right.
He wasn't just a night soil carrier.
Yeah. And also racially, because you grow up together with people with different races. My best friend was Fatima, a Malay girl, and Parvati, who is an Indian girl. So you as a child, you don't have any prejudice about races, because you grow up and you're friends. That's it. You don't think about it until people tell you, oh, you mustn't, oh, this or that. This racial prejudice usually comes from adults, not from children.
Yes, yes. So you're trained, you grow up with the sense of looking for the person first before the category.
Yeah, you treat people like people. We're looking at each other. We're looking at eyes and body language and all that. Whereas a lot of modern young people or modern people, because they're looking down at their iPad or their iPhone, they're not making eye contact with other people.
I just read
in a bus or any MRT.
I just heard there is an app that somebody has developed these days to ensure that when somebody is on their handphone, something beeps so that they are reminded to look up and look around them so that when they cross the road, they're not endangering themselves. I think that's really sad. Okay, we're going to come back with more from Josephine Chia. We're going to find out if life in Potong Pasir changed within this 10 years, 1955 to 1965, that her book of short stories brings to life so vividly. Stay tuned.
In the Wow Club.
1951, but spent all her childhood and teenage years in Kampong, Potong Pasir. Josephine Chia is the author of Kampong Spirit Gotong Royong, Life in Potong Pasir. She has more than 9 books under her belt. She's an established writer, winner of the Singapore Literature Prize for 2014 for non-fiction. Such a pleasure to have her in the Wow Club. Josephine, tell me, between 1955 and 65, did life in the Kampong change in your eyes?
Well, I guess it did towards the end of don't quote me on the year. My brain is befuddled. But about 1963, 64, when we had a generator and we could have electricity in the house. So that changed things a bit. Yeah, we had the first refrigerator. But before that, we didn't have any electricity, so we couldn't have ice cubes or, a fan, and the lights that we used were kerosene lamps.
Okay, so the advent of electricity changed things a great deal.
Yes, it did. To some extent, because it brought the world to us in a way, in that little box, which we were a little bit like a frog and a coconut shell, a bit cloistered, because we don't know that much unless we read. So that's why I thought, education was so important, and I wanted to be educated. But a lot of the children in the village were not educated. My 2 friends were not educated.
You didn't speak English for a while?
No. We only spoke Malay because Malay was the lingua franca, and of course everyone in Singapore spoke Hokkien as well. I spoke both Hokkien and Teochew.
So it's only when you went to school that you picked up the language that you would then write your books in?
That's right, yeah. So it was magical because I fell in love with the English language. I think the moment I encountered it, I thought it was very beautiful. I read and write in Malay, and I did study Malay till university, but still English was a love affair.
What does Gotong Royong mean then, translated from the Malay?
The word actually means to do things together, basically, if it's the literal term. Doing things together. So that's why it's translated as community spirit or kampong spirit. But it's the way that people do things together with each other.
Oh, okay,
like
that's
we
interesting.
did in the village, yeah.
If you think of casting the circle of community then in
That's
terms
right.
of how you created things together.
Correct, yeah.
Very interesting.
So there's less, I guess, of the isolation of a person. There was more of a community. People are living outdoors because of the heat and because we had no, electric fan or TV to watch in a house. Eventually, even when TV came in, we're still in black and white, people who could afford the television set opened their house up to the others. So we all sat together in the book. You'll see that when eventually my family had a TV, my brother bought a TV, all the others in the kampong would crowd into the house, and then we'd be serving epok-epok and kacang putih as though we're at a cinema.
Tomorrow is World Toilet Day. I know many people in the kampong grew up without a toilet though, or an outdoor toilet,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we had a shared toilet. It's called a jamban. It's an outhouse.
And there was a pecking order
And
as to
it's
who would be able to use it first?
Well, those who get in the queue first, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, it's democratic that sense. And Josephine Chia is the author of Kampong Spirit. She's taking us all the way back to 1955 to experience life in a kampong in Potong Pasir. Stay tuned for more from Josephine.
And to your Wow Factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.
Symbols of
Josephine Chia is my guest this evening. She is an author extraordinaire, the woman behind Kampong Spirit Gotong Royong Life in Potong Pasir, 1955 to 1965. She's written fiction and non-fiction. Her book, Frog Under a Coconut Shell, which details her relationship with her mother, her late mother, and it talked about your mother, blooming through life all the way to her experiences with Alzheimer's, of course. And that was very, very moving. And then there is a novel, My Mother-in-Law's Son, and that's a work of fiction. But tonight we're talking about Kampong Spirit. I wanted to discuss this not only because it's won the Singapore Literature Prize for 2014, but because I think it takes us to a part of Singapore's history that not many people may have ever experienced in their lives. So, Josephine, can you read us an excerpt of the book?
Oh, okay, thanks. And just to give a little background, we had some English books that were thrown away by the English who live on the top of the hill in Woodley.
Oh, this is when you were a child in the
yes.
Kampong. Okay.
Because this is, I'm still in the village, aren't I?
Okay.
So my two friends are Fatima and Parvati. Of course, I had to change the names in the book to protect the families. And they were uneducated. So basically, I wanted to show that, education is so important because I eventually had the luck to go to school. So when we gathered the famous 5 books, I would read to Parvati and Fatima. So this excerpt that I'm reading out, I've just read them a story. So many uneducated girls in the Kampong were still subjected to arranged marriages. As soon as they became teenagers, their fates were sealed. That was why I was so grateful that my mother had fought for me to attend school. Otherwise, my fate would have been like theirs, although my father still threatened to marry me off as soon as I was eligible. But like Parvati, I had planned to run away if my father forced me to marry, except that I didn't want to hurt my precious mother. What are ham rolls? Fatima asked when she heard that Julian, Dick and Anne, the English children in the story, ate ham rolls and drank ginger beer. She was a Muslim and proclaimed that she would never drink an alcoholic drink like ginger beer, and weren't Western children liberal to be drinking beer at their age? She, like Parvati, did not go to school. Of course, I hadn't a clue either, but I did not want to look stupid. Well, I guess it's some kind of meat, I said. Chicken is from hens and beef from cows, so I guess ham must be from hamsters lah. What is a hamster? Fatima wanted to know. Yeah, kind of animal lah, I said, exasperated, not wanting to show my lack of knowledge. The kind of animal that lives in England lah.
Beautifully read, beautifully read. Josephine Chia reading from her own work, Kampong Spirit Gotong Royong Life in Potong Pasir. Now, you mentioned in that excerpt that some women found themselves in forced marriages, and your friend Parvati, unfortunately...
better not give away the end of the book.
We're not going to give it away? Well, should we just say that
she
exercised the least bit of choice that she had, right?
Was very sad. It had a profound impact on my life. In fact, I think about it quite a lot, and and I felt sad that she never had the education. And her mother was one of the many wives of the father. In Singapore, the Women's Charter didn't come into about 1963, around there, and so women were not protected, so men could marry as many wives as they like. And the trouble is that if they were wealthy men, that was okay, because all the women would be well looked after. But in case of Parvati's mother, the father wasn't wealthy. He was always a drunk, and he came back to the village to the mother to have his way with her and all that kind of thing. So he wanted to marry the daughter off so that he could have some money. And so when he found a man who's like just widowed and 2 children, 20 years older than Parvati, and he wanted to marry her off, So that was very sad for a young girl. She was only in her teens. She was only 4 years older than myself.
Thank goodness for the Women's Charter. And next week on WOW, we'll find out more about Shirin Foster and her role implementing the Women's Charter. So we'll have memories of Shirin Foster as related by Claire Chiang right here on WOW. That's coming up next week. But for now, we're talking to Josephine Chia, author of Kampong Spirit. By the way, keep those likes coming through at our Facebook page and you could walk away a winner of the book Kampong Spirit, Gotong Royong, signed, by the way, by Josephine Chia. Now, tell us a little bit about why you wanted to write this particular book.
I felt that after writing Frog Under a Coconut Shell, that was much more a bigger story, and it was about my mum. I felt that I wanted to give her the kudos for having educated me. I couldn't have gone to England or spoke English or even write without what she had done for me. So, and then when she had Alzheimer's, I felt that I was losing her while she was still alive, which was very painful. And I knew of other families who have people with Alzheimer's. And it's a very difficult process dealing with someone who has Alzheimer's, because not only do they lose their memory, their characters and personalities change as well, depending on which part of the brain is being attacked by the disease. So
How
it's
was
much
your mother
more than
changed?
dementia. Sorry?
How did your mother change?
Sometimes, she may rant and rave or get angry where, there was no reason to, and people thought in the beginning that it was her, but it wasn't. It was the disease. The doctors explained to us.
Yes.
But if we didn't understand this, then, you get estranged from the patient. And I wanted to write the book so that other families will know how to deal with their Alzheimer's, patient as well, and realize that it's not from a lack of love, but it's just a disease,
Yeah, you talked about the family dynamics and how, different members of your family cope differently, and some came closer because they could manage, in a relationship with your mother, even though personality changes were happening, and some didn't, but everybody coped in their own way. Yeah,
I think also because I was in England, so in a way I didn't have to cope with the day-to-day problems that, they encounter. So, it's fair to say that, I get the least trouble from that. And when I come back from England, she would just say, "Oh, you're back," and we'll sit and have a meal together, and I don't get all the difficult things. So I think that was part of the sharing. But after writing the book, I realized that maybe, I shouldn't write about other people in the family, because this is my story, my situation with my mum, and my love for her and her love for me. And I think it was very difficult, because you can't not write a book about my mother without involving the family. But anyway, I said I wouldn't write another book like that. And my readers were saying to me they want another book about the Kampong, and it did feel like there were things about the Kampong that were still left unfinished. And I thought, my God, there were so many characters in the Kampong, real people in the Kampong, and they were doing quite interesting things, and I ought to tell their stories for them. So that's why in this book I try to talk less about my own family. Of course, it's inevitable, because I'm seeing the Kampong through my eyes. But I wanted to share the stories of the villagers, like the cow herd, the men who look after cows, and the Karim, who is a very musically talented.
I'm just reading about Karim's song about satay.
Yeah. It was a P. Ramlee song, and he loves P. Ramlee, and he used to sing P. Ramlee song. He plays the guitar beautifully. My mum was very talented as well, and that's why I realized in Frog I wanted to find out how come my mum could play music when we were so poor. And I realized she had a different life in Malacca, that she came from a very rich family, and I wanted to know how she became so poor. So that was the reason for one of the reasons for writing Frog. And
what struck me when I read this book was not only the wonderful descriptions of place and food. Which,
I'm such a foodie.
Goodness, so am I. We're going to get to that in a while. But the pantons that seem to color all the music. the poetry that people lived with on a daily basis.
Exactly. And I think that this is why it nurtures the creative aspects of us. I think Kampong life, because we weren't so stressed up, I guess, like modern day. And in the evening, we didn't have TV to go to, so we talked to each other, and then we sat and sang songs and recite poems. I mean, how much more creative can you be? So it nurtures the creative part of us. And in the book, you will see there's a progression for Karim. Eventually, he had the opportunity to actually go and play his guitar.
What is a keroncong?
Keroncong is a folk song, a Malay folk song.
A song that is a plaintive Malay folk song singing of heartbreak, loss, and pain.
Yeah.
You say Peranakans also love this keroncong.
Correct.
I wish we could play a little excerpt of that, actually, but I think I won't stress you out too much by asking you to sing.
I can do a pantun.
Oh, let's hear a
That's all I
pantun.
do. A pantun in this song.
Yes, I'd love a pantun.
Okay. The pantun is very meaningful. It says, if you have a needle, you don't put it in a broken needle. Don't put it in a box. And if you have someone says a wrong word, don't put it in your heart. Of course, in Malay, the words will rhyme, and it goes something like that. Kalau ada jarum patah, jangan disimpan dalam peti. Kalau ada kata yang salah, jangan disimpan dalam hati.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Josephine. That's the first pantun we've had on. Wow. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's a lesson there. So if there's heartbreak, don't store it like a broken needle in your heart.
Exactly. Because that means don't bear grudges.
Don't hold the memory.
Release it. You let it go,
Oh, that's
Why
just
keep
beautiful.
it, As like you wouldn't keep a broken needle. Why keep anything that has hurt you? Just let it go.
The beautiful things about, the peribahasa or the pantones were that it spoke to you in very vivid images, simple images, but very vivid. Now, I wonder, you mention in I think even in our interviews how food is important to you and very important to the Peranakan heritage as well. Can you share with us a little bit about the theme of or some of the food that came back to you when you were writing this book that you maybe haven't had tasted in a while?
Well, I think the one that stays in my memory is, of course, my mother's nasi lemak. Yeah, because I mentioned at the start of this book that even when I was in England and it was snowing outside and I'm under this duvet and it's pretty cold, and I wake up and I try to catch that fragrance of the coconut boiling in the pot, because my mom used to cook it early in the morning, and the fragrance of the coconut is just heaven, especially because the coconut is very fresh. It's not from the market or anything. She would pluck the coconut, scrape it all manually, and then she squeeze the milk out of it, and when you boil the rice in it, it's just heaven. And I just salivate when even think about it. So it's something for me that is very, very close for me as well as for my mom, and I always think about it. And I think that the food of your childhood stays with you a long time. I have been 30 years in England and I still don't eat bread and toast in the morning. I would make my own nasi lemak or lontong or mee goreng or something like that.
Well, food stays with you and your writing has stayed with me since the moment I picked up Frog Under a Coconut Shell. I congratulate you on winning the Singapore Literature Prize, Josephine. Very happy
for you. It was so
you.
Unexpected, actually.
I'm glad that it came your way. You deserve every accolade. Josephine Chia, my guest in WOW, author of Kampong Spirit. Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for having me.
Add to your Wow Factor with Michelle Martin in the Wow Club on 938 Live.